So look, this group's been going in an informal way with people coming and going for 15 years now, and this exhibition is a summing up of those 15 years. How has being a part of this group and these trips made a difference to your own practice over that time?
It's changed my practice completely, because before I started doing these landscape trips, I was working in academia, and I think I was more influenced by what was going on in the theoretical side of it, and I think I always knew that I wanted to paint landscape at some point. And the trips, the first trip I went to, I realised that this is it from now on. I'm going to paint landscape, and that's what's happened. I'd always painted landscape, but I became far more serious and focused on it in 2012 when I went to Flinders Ranges.
So was there a moment on that trip that was a sort of an eye-opener in your own practice, working plein air?
Yeah. Not one particular moment, but I just remember just being astonished by the colour and the space, and your head just goes to a good place when you're painting in a place that you find visually stimulating. And I had some lovely moments out there, even though the paintings that I made out there I wasn't terribly satisfied with. I knew that's what I wanted to do.
So given that your practice has really been influenced and changed since you started working plein air, but you'd had a whole career as a studio artist before those trips from 2012 onwards. So how has your studio work changed in that time with the influence of the plein air trips?
Well, it's changed because the subject has changed for a start. I used to paint urban landscapes from photographs. I did sort of postmodern stuff when that was the time. I've been a geometric painter, abstract geometric painter.
I still see some of that in the background, even of your plein air works. Can you talk to that?
That goes back to
really interesting.
The training I had was with abstract painters, and the vogue was geometric sort of abstraction and colour field painting, and it was very formalist. And so when I paint a landscape, I'm always looking for big formal shapes, like a big triangle or a couple of diagonals. This was a new experience, painting in the snow. This is a plein air that I did, standing up on the Kosciuszko Road next to a little stream of melting snow, and it was pretty amazing. It just sounded terrific, and you get that sort of incredible dampened sound of when there's snow around, and it was cold, and we wore an awful lot of clothes, and managed to get what I felt I wanted to get with that one. This one here is a painting from the same day, but it is done from a photograph, and that's a studio painting, so it's probably more realistic, less expressive. This one's more expressive. As for this is where, not far from where I live, this is a big rock face that caved down in the 1930s. It's called Dog Face by the local climbers, and this was the sun shining on it at the end of the day. And as I was saying before, I like big simple shapes, so that big area of light is like a huge disc in the middle of the picture, and I adjust the other colours around it to make this even more dramatic. The Monaro plane was a real favourite, and maybe you can see that in some of the pictures in this exhibition. This wonderful Gothic sort of landscape of sometimes treeless sort of plains with sheep and cattle and snow. Yeah. And
you've got two very non-romantic little images that allude to the Monaro, I think, there.
Well, yeah, I mean, this beautiful place on the Monaro Plain is where, first of all, I saw this little land that had died and was decomposing, and it had little flowers growing around it, and I found it really quite beautiful. And then I walked about 50 metres up a hill, and there's little hillocks on this huge big property and massive big boulders, and in amongst the boulders there was a decomposing fox. And so this is the reality of farm life and nature, and this is the stuff that I also look for when I go to paint. So not everything is just about beautiful scenes, it's about reality.
Takes us back to a Dutch still life.
Yes.
Vanitas, reminder of cycle of life sort of stuff.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
We were talking a second ago about the comparison and the distinction between the plein air work and the studio work. You've got an example of each here, and we can clearly see the connection in terms of the view. Can you talk us through some of the differences that are happening there in your experience of the work?
And like this one here is a studio painting that I made from this plein air painting. This one here took me a couple of days up in Yungala, working up there, painting the valley, and this one here, this one took me a few weeks, I think, to put together. But in this one, I got interested in these sort of rhythmic marks, and I've always been interested in patterns. So this becomes a series of rhythmic patterned marks that, if you step back, falls into landscape. Whereas with this one, I was very interested in summing up the actual landscape I was looking at. I did do some studio work afterwards, and that's the finer, more controlled bit of the front, but most of the rest of it was made on site in the studio.
Well, the thing I observe is that the skill level you've developed over those years to be able to do that sort of painting plein air, that you can bring in so much information so quickly and so accurately, and then almost paradoxically in the big work in the sky. And I remember visiting your studio while you were working on that sky. There's a looseness in that, but you appear to be, to my eye, bringing up kind of historical references in the Romantic tradition in particular. So can you talk to that maybe in the bigger studio work, some of the, the shoulders of giants that we stand on in terms of influences?
I think art can never compete with nature, and what happened was just on sunset, this big storm came over the valley, and we were all running around taking photographs. Like, everybody got excited because it was just so dramatic, and my painting falls a bit short of the actual drama of what was going on, but I wanted to capture that drama of a storm rolling in and the light being sort of reduced down to certain sections where there's breaks in the clouds and stuff like that. And I love 19th century Romantic landscape painting. Not all of it, but the good stuff is really good, I think. And the sort of painting that was triggered off by Turner at the end of the 18th century, and that's one of my favourite things. But I also love other sorts of art too, which, sort of abstraction and that, which comes in if you look at this in just in close up, and here, and there's even touches of Art Nouveau in that tree trunk, absolutely. You absorb all this stuff over the years, but particularly if you're teaching, and it just comes out. You do something, maybe even accidentally, and you think, oh, that's interesting, I'll exaggerate that, I'll go with that, and so,
having seen your work in progress, I think viewers of the finished work would be surprised at that underpainting layer of how abstract and how much of that geometric abstraction
Yeah.
is still
Yeah.
flowing through in the final work.
Yeah, I try to lay down colours and marks that I know will be covered up 95%, but it's those 5% that are left that can just make a painting more exciting for me. And
you can see that
see
possibly a bit in that lowest level of cloud just above the horizon
That's right.
line.
Yeah, you can see the underpainting up
in
there.
the top area up there as
up
well.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and see even coming through here.
Yeah.
See.
The other thing you allude to there is this really interesting dialogue with the studio and the plein air. Like, I think there's an assumption that the studio, well, it's just a bigger version of the plein air, or there's more detail, or you've got more time. But you're actually capturing something in the studio work that was so quick in reality that it wasn't practical to get a plein air.
No.
But being plein air all day meant that you were there for that moment, and you'd absorbed the landscape all day. So it gave you the belief and the memory to then treat it as
absorb is a good word, because that's it. You do. You're in it all day. It becomes like home.
Yeah, absolutely.
And animals sort of come in and out of your field of vision, because they get used to you sitting there, being still. Sometimes they come up, like lizards and things have come up around me, and you become part of for a moment you're privileged enough to become part of the environment. So Tim.
Yes.
What would you like to say about the group and how it began and why it holds together and what people get out of it?
Good question. Look, I guess the thing that makes it work is it's really organic. There's a few of us, yourself, myself, Brad Short, a few others who've been on most of the trips, and then there's people who've been on some of the trip, people who've been on 1 or 2 trips, and obviously it's that huge sense of bonding as professional artists who are all doing the same kind of mad, crazy, not easy to make a living, probably over the course of a career more downs than ups, although still really, really intense ups when things all work. We kind of understand this living, this career we've set out. And the people who've come on board, who've seen what's happening and have been really keen to come on board, when they've joined, it feels to me it's that aspect that they're really searching for. It's kind of like they know that that's out there, and our isolated studio lives kind of do miss out on that a little bit.
I haven't seen you standing in front of a tree with an easel and a kidney-shaped palette. Can you tell me a little bit about your approach to plein air painting?
So it's really varied over many years. I'd been plein air painting way back in the 80s at art school when it was very unfashionable. It fitted into my sort of background of bushwalking and climbing, and that my engagement with the landscape outside of making art. And it's ebbed and flowed. I've done huge sort of 2 metre by 1.5 metre paintings that I've carried to a spot and worked on plein air. I've done small little 30 by 40 centimetre works, but one of the things that is unified through all of that is I like to feel that whatever I'm taking plein air, the artwork and all the materials I can carry on my back. Sometimes I'll have to do a couple of trips, but mainly I want to feel I can carry them on my back, and that means I can get to landscapes that are more remote, that make me feel like I'm more engaged with a wilderness aspect to landscape, and just that idea that you're self-sufficient, that you got yourself in there under your own steam, you do everything during the course of the day, and that also means, this is important to me, the idea of what you carry in, you carry out. All your paint water or terps, if there's terps, obviously all goes out, everything has to go in the right containers, you're not leaving a drop of paint or anything else behind. So I'm quite organised with that. I normally have everything in just a big backpack, and for larger canvases and larger works on paper, I strap them to the outside of the pack. I get thin 3mm MDF boards, and I put little notches in them so I can string rope around them that sort of wrap them to the pack, and I pre-stretch the big sheets of paper. I usually have 2 of them faced in with some glassine paper,
So all that part of it, I feel like that's part of the challenge, because there's so many uncertainties. You know, you can get rain, you can get snow, you can get heat, like you said before, you can get flies, wind's the worst. Feeling like you're actually organised and you're in vague control of those uncontrollable aspects of it, I feel like if you do all that, then the actual artwork itself will kind of take care of itself. So I enjoy all that part of it, feeling like I've got the materials right and I've got the processes right.
You mentioned poetic, you said the word poetic. When you make a painting, what's more important to you, if anything? The poetic thought of what you're doing, the emotion you're trying to convey, the technique you're using, or the depiction of something that maybe people don't see every day. I think you've hinted at a few of those things, but does any of that stand out as being more important than anything else?
Well, I think I think you've answered. That's a great answer to a question about what you're trying to do. I think all of those things are important. I guess that's a good lead into what I think all of the various people who've been on these trips are trying to do. No one is what I might call a traditional plein air painter. We've all got skills in that department. We can all do representational tone and colour and do it relatively fast enough that we can get something to look like the thing, you know, in an hour or two. But there's more going on than just that, and trying to convey the feeling of being immersed in the landscape is important. But again, without trying deliberately to do that, without being didactic about it, for me, in the way I work, the energy of the mark making, which becomes a part of working fast and responding to the plein air environment, that also becomes an energy of all the emotions and sense of, I like to talk about, and it is classic romantic 19th century engagement with the landscape, but that sense of there is both anxiety and awe going on in that environment. Again, even taking it away from the 19th century, the anxiety part of it is, if you take yourself, now we talk about going on these trips as a group, but usually during the day I will take myself off by myself, you know, quite some distance away, and spend the day by myself, often hours away from, you know, where we started. And that sense of being that little speck in a big landscape by yourself under your own steam, that's very appealing, but it has an inbuilt anxiety into it as well. And capturing the tension between those two things, I think, feeds into my process and my mark making. These two plein air done on the spot up at Youngler, Broken River, sitting down on the rocks there in the middle of the river, finding a spot to spread out the gear. A range of materials I use a lot plein air, so watercolour, ink, chalk pastel, charcoal, occasionally pencil. Layering the wet media and the dry media, taping the watercolour paper down. I've still got to clean that up to get it ready for framing. And look, they're about expressive mark making and a sense of an abstract expression, a sensibility in its own right, but they're also entirely done on the spot. I haven't then done any work afterwards, so they're a complete response to the process of being in that spot again for the whole day. I usually work on two at once, because with the drying times you've got some wet media drying, so I often try and set up somewhere where I can have one angle, one view, a different view, have one drying while I'm working on the other one, building up all the linear marks as well as the wet on wet wet media marks, and these are quite zoomed in, sort of taking away the horizon line, so you're down in amongst it in that rainforesty setting. I don't want them to be specifically, they have to be recognisable as that location, but they're a response entirely to what's in front of me. The rocks, the shapes, the forms, the flow of the river, the greenery behind. Colours are exaggerated, but they're colours that are there in the landscape. So that's an immediate response. Then the work, the studio work, well, hopefully it's apparent that it speaks to the plein air works, but it's got its own reality as well. It's from the Youngler series, but it's from other influences, and it ultimately becomes its own world, I hope, that the viewer can take whatever experience they've got, whatever places they've spent time in, and bring that to the work, or from the work to themselves as well. So it's got a rainforesty green tinged element to it. It's got the rocks and the water and the reflections and the shafts of light coming through that speak to the experience of being here all day, but again, hopefully with its own reality that comes from that contemplative time in the studio. And then the other thing is just technically, although I've done plenty of oil painting plein air as well, this way of oil painting, where I'm doing lots and lots of layers of glazing, needing to let it dry and then building up the next layer, takes months and months and months to work on. So there's this obvious technical things that can only happen in the studio.